As I make this video, the initial investigation report, the preliminary investigation report on the Ethiopian Airlines air crash in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, is due to be released anytime now, at least within today, Thursday, 4th of April, 2019. However, even before the release of the report, there's been a leak. Those close to the investigation, those who have listened to the cockpit voice recorder, are talking, and they're releasing information that is extremely shocking, to say the least. And I dare say, information that seems to confirm what we have been saying on this channel all along. Now, it is one thing, to get hold of information, but it's quite another to understand what that information means. And therefore, we're going to break it down so that we all fully understand what the shocking implications of this investigation, what it has revealed, is. Okay? And we shall do that immediately after the brief upcoming commercial break. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Welcome back. Now, those who are familiar with air crash investigations will just have to be a little patient with me, because I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Now, the voice cockpit recorder records the conversations going on inside the cockpit of an aircraft. And then there's also a cockpit data recorder, which takes note, tells you exactly what the aircraft was doing, the instructions that the pilots were giving to the aircraft, and how the aircraft was responding. And therefore, with these two marvelous gadgets, you can be able to conclusively say precisely what was happening inside an aircraft in its last moments. And so we need to appreciate that the preliminary investigation report is based on information from these two gadgets, which were recovered from the site of the accident in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Africa. And if it makes you feel any better, I'm actually making this recording, this video, from fairly close, to the air crash accident scene. From Africa. Now, according to information leaked from the preliminary report, the pilots of the ill-fated Flight 302 Ethiopian Airlines actually switched off the MCAS. Yep. They went through the Boeing checklist, for switching off the MCAS. That should completely rubbish the allegation by some that these pilots were not well trained, that these pilots were in Africa, and therefore they messed up. They didn't know what to do. That has appeared very frequently in the comments area of the videos I've done concerning this topic on this channel. And so, if what Boeing has been telling us all along is true, then this crash should never have happened. Because we've been told by Boeing over and over again that in such a situation, you just simply switch off the MCAS. Problem solved. And the pilots regain control of the aircraft. They can manually control the aircraft and get it out of the danger, get it out of the crisis it is in. This piece of evidence is irrefutable evidence that actually that does not work, at least in some instances, in the MAX 8. Because this aircraft still crashed, killing all those on board. Now, the next piece of evidence is even more shocking. Despite the pilots successfully switching off the MCAS, so that they could manually control the aircraft still continued pointing nose down. The aircraft still continued experiencing problems. And what happened next is that the MCAS switched on again. I've chosen my words carefully. They switched on again, And it is still not conclusive. It is still not clear whether they are switched back on by the pilots or they switched back on automatically. Now, most experts I've spoken to say they believe the MCAS software kicked in automatically again. And what they are saying makes perfect sense. Because sample this, if aircraft is pointing down, you switch off the MCAS, still there's no change, still you're having problems controlling the aircraft. Would it make sense for you to switch the MCAS back on? Of course not. Because when you switch them back on, automatically the aircraft will point nose down. Now, in the other Max 8 crash in Indonesia, we have been repeatedly told that it was a faulty sensor. The single faulty angle of attack sensor at the front of the aircraft caused the software to believe that the aircraft was in danger, falsely believe that the aircraft was in danger of a stall, and therefore kept on pointing the nose of the aircraft down. And therefore, one of the fixes that has been widely proposed is to have more than one sensor. And indeed, in the fix Boeing have revealed, which has been looked at by the FAA, there are two sensors. And the two sensors have to agree. And when they disagree, there's a light that goes on in the cockpit. The pilots know what's happening. And so, one of the things that this preliminary crash investigation report tells us is that we have to look for another culprit other than faulty sensors. Why? Because when you successfully switch off the MCAS, then the sensors are no longer in play. Simple. And we have been repeatedly told that there are a lot of similarities between the Lion Air crash in Indonesia and the Ethiopian Airlines crash in Ethiopia, which puts into question the preliminary report on the Lion Air crash in Indonesia. This new evidence from the Ethiopian Airlines crash. Oh yes, that's precisely what it means. And let me make it clear, crystal clear, why I'm saying that. You see, after the Lion Air crash in Indonesia, Boeing released information to all their 737-8 MAX clients, and pilots especially, and told them that in the event that this happens, then the solution is to switch off the MCAS, and then you'll be safe. The aircraft will be able to fly out of the crisis, out of the problem. And so the Ethiopian Airlines pilots had this information, and they followed the instructions to the letter, and still crashed. In other words, this is very similar to an imaginary situation, where time travel is possible. And therefore, after the Lion Air crash in Indonesia, we go back in time. And the pilots are told, when that happens, switch off the MCAS. And the pilots follow the instructions to the letter. They switch off the MCAS. And then yet again, the aircraft crashes. Yes, because we have been told over and over again that investigators are increasingly finding similarities in the data between the Ethiopian Airlines crash and the Lion Air crash in Indonesia. Oh yes, that is precisely what the evidence tells us here. We should never lose sight of the fact that Boeing is a very powerful corporation. And powerful corporations are all about profits. And powerful corporations all the time fool the public. They release false information. They plant information which is quickly spread by Boeing sycophants. Somebody used that phrase on this channel in the comments area, and I like it. Boeing sycophants. And these Boeing sycophants tell you with a straight face, Boeing are saying this and that and that. And therefore the implication is that it is gospel truth. Get serious. Get real. Get real about the real world and how things work. And so, based on this evidence, let us try and come up with possible theories of what may have happened on that flight. Now you'll remember in an earlier video, and in case you missed it, I'll put up a link. In fact, the link should be up there right now on the top right hand corner of your screen. Go over and watch that video. In that video, I said that based on the flight path of the MAX 8, its final moments, the Ethiopian Airlines one, the possibilities are quite high that the pilots actually successfully switched off the MCAS. And I told you at the time that this piece of advice, recommendation from Boeing, just doesn't make sense. Why? Because the MCAS is put there as a safety feature. The MCAS is supposed to save the aircraft. And therefore, in other words, the aircraft cannot, the MAX 8, cannot fly without the MCAS software. And so, what happens when you switch it off? The truth is, you'll actually put the aircraft in more danger than when it was when the MCAS was on. Let me just explain a possible scenario here. So we entered the cockpit of the Ethiopian Airlines, the ill-fated Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. The pilots have finally managed to switch off the MCAS. And remember another very important piece of information. The aircraft speed was extraordinarily high. It was high, above what would be normal. Now, as I've said in an earlier video, the MCAS was introduced very late in the certification process. What that means is that the aircraft had been developed up to the certification process, and therefore it was just now being approved, for commercial use. And it was then that it was discovered that the MAX 8 had a tendency of going nose up. And this is a dangerous situation, because if an aircraft goes nose up suddenly, and the pilots don't react on time, it will stall and crash. And so the MCAS was introduced as a safety feature to counteract this, to make the aircraft safer. Because when that happens, the software kicks in and overrides whatever the pilots are doing and points the nose of the aircraft back down, and therefore pilots are able to recover. And so, back to the cabin of the Ethiopian Airlines plane. The MCAS has been successfully switched off, but the aircraft was traveling at a very high speed, and the sensors are working. That is why the MCAS switched on in the first place. So what happens immediately the MCAS is switched off? The nose of the plane points dangerously nose up, and the pilots, they struggle to regain control of the aircraft. And they can't. Why? Because the MCAS was introduced because in ordinary situations, pilots cannot control this, unless the MCAS software helps them by forcing the nose of the aircraft nose down. Now there's something you should take note of, because of the design of the MAX 8, the higher the speed, the more vulnerable it is to a nose-up situation. And therefore, my theory is that this aircraft was doomed, because of the high speed. If the aircraft was 30,000 feet up in the air, then the situation would have been very different, because there's plenty of time. And if the plane points nose down, it is not such a panicky situation as when the aircraft is very close to the ground, because there's time to recover. But when this happens shortly after takeoff, there are serious problems, serious issues. And that is why, bottom line, I can say, based on my theory, which is based on actual evidence from the air crash accident, the MAX 8 is not safe to fly. That's really what it is. Now we shall go for a break, and when we come back, I will explain the other fix to this problem of nose up that Boeing should have implemented at the manufacturing stage. And I'll also explain why they did not implement it. Because it should be clear to all of us that had they implemented it at that stage, had they resisted the temptation of a shortcut by using software, the MCAS, to solve the problem, had they resisted that temptation and gone back to the manufacturing stage, then over 300 precious souls would still be alive today. Don't miss that. I'll be back shortly. Welcome back. Now, the long and short of what I'm about to tell you is that marketing became too powerful for manufacturing and engineering. Let me explain. All through the development of the Max 8, the focus was on fuel efficiency. Getting an engine that would be more fuel efficient. Why? Because a more fuel efficient aircraft would completely dominate the market. Airlines are profit-making organizations, and one of their largest costs in getting a passenger from one point to the other is fuel cost. What that means is that if an airline is able to reduce its costs, its fuel costs, by only 5%, the impact on its profits, on its profitability, would be colossal, huge. And yet the Max 8 managed an amazing over 20% fuel efficiency. So what that means is that an airline can save 20% from its costs on fuel. And that is why it is not surprising that the Max 8 is the fastest selling aircraft, passenger aircraft in history. And so the marketing guys who are all after profits, who are all after market share, selling more, making more profits, at Boeing, wanted the engineering guys to come up with a fuel-efficient aircraft. And the very smart guys at engineering figured out that what they would need is a larger engine, which they identified and fixed on the 737 frame to create the Max 8. Now, of course, there are various engineering challenges. And the biggest challenge, which is at the crux of the problem with the Max 8, is the fact that they had to place the engines on the front part of the wings and high up. Why? Because the design of the 737 is such that it's very close to the ground. The wings are very close to the ground, which was no problem with a smaller engine. But here we are with a larger engine for fuel efficiency. Now, aerodynamically, one of the things that this did was to make the front of the aircraft heavier than the back, which is something you don't want to do in an aircraft. When an aircraft is heavy at the front, then the tendency is to point nose down. But this was not a major problem, because with the help of a wonderful tool called an air tunnel, which was used by the Wright brothers to discover mechanized flight, you can observe the behavior of an aircraft in flying conditions, and make calculations and make the necessary adjustments. Adjustments like adjusting the wing, maybe the surface area, adjusting the stabilizers at the back, and so on and so forth. And therefore this was done, and the problem was solved. Now what happened is that at the late stage of certification, because the aircraft goes through various tests, it was suddenly realized that the MAX 8, under certain conditions, would have a tendency to suddenly go nose up. What this means, put simply, is that the engineers must have overcompensated somewhere, in their bid to deal with the problem of the aircraft being heavy at the front, and therefore having a tendency in flight to point nose down. Whatever they did overcompensated, and in certain conditions, the plane would actually go nose up. Now, the right decision here, when Boeing realized this, would have been to go back to the drawing boards, and redesign, the wings and the stabilizers with a lot of precision. And an engineer with no eye for profits, would have done exactly that without a second thought. However, as I said earlier on, this thing seems to have been run by marketing and profits. Even slight modifications and redesigning of the MAX 8 at this stage would have been horribly expensive. Indeed, it would have completely changed the math. And of course, the MAX 8 would not have been launched on time to take advantage of the situation in the market and make those huge profits and those amazing sales. The situation in any market is not stagnant. It's very fluid. And therefore, if you delay for another few months or a year or two, who knows what will happen? Maybe by the time you finally come out with your MAX 8, there'll be no market for it, even after you've sunk in millions and millions of dollars into its development. And therefore, the quick fix was to ignore the right thing to do and instead to introduce software, to introduce the MCAS. Now, when you understand what I've just said, then you'll agree with me that the solution to the MAX 8 is not a software fix. Never. How can that be the solution? The solution, the real, safe, true solution, is to go back to the drawing boards and completely redesign the aircraft. Of course, this is horribly expensive. It could ruin Boeing. All that is very true, and any entrepreneur will understand that. However, I want to ask you a very simple question. How much is the life of a single human being on planet Earth worth? Is it worth $1 billion? Is it worth 10 billion? Actually, it has no value. Human life is priceless. And so, however horribly expensive this is, Boeing must, and I repeat, must do the right thing. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.